Tara Hurster, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
If tomorrow is your last day to live, how will you spend it?
Holy crap. I would spend it with the people that I care about, doing the things that I enjoy. So the things that I enjoy are really being comfortable. So if it's a warm day tomorrow, then I'd be on the beach with my partner. If it was a cold day tomorrow, I'd probably be watching a movie with my partner. So really, I'd be with my partner doing something that's cozy, comfy, and enjoyable.
Speaking of movie, what would be the last movie that you're going to watch?
Oh, now, Zach. Okay. There are a lot of really epic movies. I am a kids movie buff. I love kids movies. I watched Inside Out 4 times in the cinema, and the 4th time was on my 30th birthday alone. So it'd probably be Inside Out, actually.
I thought you were going to say Top Gun, Maverick.
If you were speaking to my partner, it would be Top Gun Maverick, for sure.
Yep. Maybe if I was there, if you'll spend...
If it was the two of us, we would be definitely watching Top Gun Maverick.
Yep, the old one and the new one.
Yes.
Okay.
Talk to me, Goose.
Talk to me, Tara. I need my psychologist. If tomorrow you wake up and there's $100 million in your bank account, tax-free, that's your money. Mm-hmm. What would you do?
I would put it all into investments, and then I would manage the dividends from that and do the things that I want to do with the dividends.
That's a very boring answer.
I know, because it means then that the $100 million is always going to be there. Because I think from memory, wasn't it, who's that Mr. Wonderful guy? Kevin O'Leary or something? I feel like I heard him say at one stage that if you have $10 million in investments, you easily can live off $300,000 and you never have to touch the actual money that's in the investment. And I just think, okay, well, if I've got, $100 million, then I can easily create a fund for organizations that I want to give to, and I'll give to them through the dividends so that I can just continue giving to them forever. And yeah, I would buy a beautiful space of land, probably in the Byron Bay hinterlands, and I would build my epic H house that I have in my head. I know that sounds weird.
What's a H house?
Yeah, it's a house that's shaped in a H, in a capital H.
Why H?
It just makes sense for how I want to live. So, kids on one side, Peter and I on the other side.
You have a bridge.
Yeah, exactly. Family, family room and kitchen down there, library, entertainment space, and then a natural pool in the middle at the back, so that the kids' rooms and the living room, lounge room both look down over the natural pool, which just excites me. And then the front part of the H is really the entrance space for the cars to come to be able to go into the garage easily. It just makes sense to have a H house.
Okay, say 100 million, but just to blow, just for fun. Okay. No investment, no house.
Well, the first thing that I would do is, see, that's still being smart. I was about to say I'd pay off everybody's mortgages that I cared about. But what I would do is I would definitely go on some Europe trips. I would invest in some more team members in the Tara Clinic and step me out of the organization a little bit further. And I would also... I don't really care for my own boat or plane or any of those things. It's really, the house, the land with a biodynamic sort of garden that I can basically live off. And then, I'd buy a Cybertruck.
Oh, I was waiting for you to say that.
Yes! I would totally buy a Cybertruck. And I would make them change it to the right-hand side driving. And
for Australia.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then I would totally buy a Cybertruck. And I'd probably again, having $100 million to just blow because why not? I would also upgrade the current Tesla that we have.
Makes sense. Me, I'll do something very silly. Like, I will dress like a very poor homeless person and walk into I don't know, like a McLaren or a Mercedes and let the guys judge me. And then like, I'll buy everything. I know they still win, but I just want to see the look on their face. Like, dude, don't judge.
You want a pretty woman them.
Yeah, that's it.
You totally want a pretty woman them. Aww. As long as you're wearing fishnets, then it's okay.
Fishnets?
Yes. So in Pretty Woman, have you seen that film?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So she
Good
wears
show.
this. So fishnets are sort of the colloquial term for the stockings that women sometimes wear.
Get it.
That have like, it's almost like a fishnet. Yes. So as long as you're wearing fishnets.
Yeah, maybe I'll do something like pay it forward. It's 100 million. I'll just, go to like Woolies and pay everyone's groceries. Go to the bar and just buy everyone drink. Just, something that will make me happy, will make people happy. Paying everyone's mortgages. And then you all go to a trip together. Maybe buy a jet. Just something crazy. So you don't have to do it alone.
Love that.
Yeah, I like what you said, like the mortgage. Okay.
Yeah, I went to London when I was 19, and I was there on my own. And while I was traveling around the world, the other places that I was at was with family, but London was the only place where I was on my own. And I was so excited to see Big Ben. I know that's a very strange thing to be excited about at 19, but I just wanted to see Big Ben, so the church with the clock. And I was standing on the bridge in front of it going, oh my God, that's Big Ben. And I felt so yuck. Like I felt like there was something really big that was missing because I didn't have someone to go, look, it's Big Ben. So I literally found a stranger on the street and said, can I just tell you that that's Big Ben? And they're like, yeah, it is. It was really awkward, but I just had to tell someone that Big Ben is right there. So yeah, I think it's important to, well, we are social animals. We're more like sheep than we give sheep credit for. And if we're not doing things together, then it really does leave a big hole in our life. And that hole often gets filled with unhelpful things, which is probably part of what we're going to talk about today. But yeah, I really saw that when I was standing in front of Big Ben, and I was so excited, but there was this big hole that all I wanted to fill it with was saying to someone, wow, that's Big Ben, and then look at me and go, yeah, wow, be as excited as I was.
All right, cool. Big Ben. I think that's enough for icebreaker. Who is Tara Hurster?
Who is Tara Hurster is different to what Tara Hurster does. What Tara Hurster does, I am a psychologist. I'm the founder of the Tara Clinic. Tara is an acronym for Therapeutic Addiction Recovery Assistance. And I help people to overcome their addictions while leaving the guilt and shame behind. Who I am is someone who is extremely unique. I am very much my own person. And I like to stand for things, right? I look at the underdog and I think that's not fair. And so I do something to really make that change. So I'm quite action oriented as a person. But yeah, who I am and what I am, sometimes those questions can be smushed together a lot of the time. But it's really, for me, it's really important to separate me from what I do. So yeah, who I am is it's a big question. I'm the person that is dependable. I am honest to a fault, and I really stand up for what's right, even if it's the hard decision to make.
Okay, since you're a business owner,
Yes.
say you walk into an elevator and you have your elevator pitch to a business person. What's your elevator pitch? Who is Tara Hurster? In the business world.
Zach, I haven't sat down and even thought about a Who is Tara Hurster in a business space elevator pitch.
Caught you.
You did catch me and I like it. Okay. It's funny. I'm finding little snippets of words. There's not a cohesive thing happening. Hold on. You might need to edit some of this out.
I won't.
Oh, okay. All right. Watch me think.
So this is Shark Tank
Yeah.
or Dragon's Den.
Yeah.
Pitch to me.
See, those places, you have a lot of time to prep for that. All right. If I was to pitch to you who I am as a business owner, I am a leader. I think laterally, and I am a natural born inventor. I look at a problem, and rather than seeing a barrier, I see an opportunity for pivoting, for creation, for development, for invention, to solve that problem once and for all. And I really think that I was strongly influenced by my grandfather, growing up around my grandfather a lot. He was an inventor and an engineer, and I would always go and visit and see him either drawing something, building something, or testing something, and he would explain to me how there was a problem that no one had thought to solve yet, and what he was either drawing, building, or testing was designed to solve that problem. So that's really how I look at business, is I think, okay, what is a problem that I'm passionate about solving, and how can I think outside the box most effectively to, design something epic that solves that problem?
And how did you become a psychologist?
Well, I was originally in high school, I wanted to be a forensic investigator because I found that I was not grossed out by dead bodies, turns out. I can tell you that story if you're interested. But then CSI came on TV and everyone thought that forensic investigation was the coolest thing ever. And I have never been able to follow a trend. I just have to buck against the trend all the time. So I thought, well, what else am I good at? And I remembered that when I was early in high school, I used to smoke. So I would sit with the quote unquote naughty kids and I would smoke, but I was also really smart and really into school. And I was talking to this young boy who was having after school detentions, lunchtime detentions, suspensions all the time. And I said to him, what is going on? Like, why are you always in so much trouble? And over time, I helped him to really change the way that he was thinking and experiment on the teachers. And he was within sort of 6 months, he wasn't suspended, wasn't getting detentions. And so when I thought, well, what else am I good at? If I'm that good at helping someone overcome a problem without training, imagine what I can do with training. And that's how I decided to become a psychologist.
It's almost like a gift.
Yeah. It's absolutely a gift. It's a natural inbuilt capacity for me to see, first of all, to be trusted by someone, to sort of draw them in a trustworthy way. I don't own judgment pants, so I just don't speak. I don't think in judgment thoughts. I don't have that. So people also feel like they can tell me things that other people might judge them for, and they know that they're not going to get that with me. And then I'm very logical. Like I with that kid, I said to him, well, the teachers don't hate me. So what are you doing? And he's like, nothing, they just hate me. And I said, well, give me the 10-second snippet of how you walk into class. Like, what does it look like? And he said, well, I'm usually late. I come in, I hit someone over the back of the head on the way in. Then I realize my book's outside, so I get up and walk outside, but I don't ask to go outside. The teacher yells at me, and then I get kicked out and I have to go to the principal's office. And I'm going, well, what if we just fuck with the teachers a little bit? And how about you turn up on time, have your books and pens with you inside the classroom, sit down, don't hit anyone on the way through, and do your work, see what happens. And he was like, oh, that'd be hilarious. they'll have no idea what to do. And I said, yeah, let's just do it. Let's just do it. Tell me what happens with this experiment at lunchtime. And he came at lunch and he was like, oh my God, they kept looking over their shoulders thinking that I was going to do something crazy. And I wasn't. I was just sitting there and they were so freaked out. And he was just finding it hilarious. And I said, all right, well, let's experiment on the next teacher and the next teacher and the next teacher. And after a few weeks of him experimenting on the teachers, he actually started to realize that he's really smart. He enjoys schoolwork. And when I helped him to understand that his behavior influences other people's response to him and that he can actually theoretically control other people's responses to him by the way that he interacts with them, he became this incredible young man. I mean, I haven't seen him in over 10 years, but I saw him after school once and I just thought, wow, that's really cool.
And fast forward today, you are a registered psychologist.
Yes.
Can we talk about your experience, your qualifications? Because there's a lot of topics here. I'm sure the audience would want to know, is she really qualified to talk about these things?
For sure, yes. So in Australia, to become a psychologist, you have to do a minimum of 6 years in training, so university as well as sort of supervised practice. So I did my undergrad at the University of Western Sydney. I did my postgrad at Macquarie University, and I was working in multiple different psychology sort of spaces, but for the most part, I was in the addiction space. I can tell you how I got there if you're interested in that journey, because it's kind of wild, but I was working in a number of inpatient private psychiatric hospitals, resort-style rehabs that were international. I've worked in rehabs for people just released from prison. And I've also worked briefly in the military, in an anxiety clinic as well, because I was curious about understanding more around anxiety. And yeah, then I started the Tara Clinic back in 2017.
And before Tara Clinic, I know the story, but the audience would want to know, what are the jobs, side hustles that you did before you became a psychologist?
Well, I mean, I have worked in every industry known to mankind except for death and garbage collection. So there's that. I think we would probably be here for a very long time if I needed to list off everything. But I also had a previous career in the fashion industry for over 14 years. I was a model, and that taught me a lot because I started doing that when I was 12 and I looked 19. So it was quite an interesting kind of culture shock at that age as well, because I grew up in sort of about an hour out of Sydney. So not super rural, but not city. So I was exposed to a lot of situations that I guess other teenagers in my area weren't exposed to or weren't privy to. And, you know, I remember actually, I might not tell that story because I'm just thinking that could end in a lawsuit. But yeah, there's some different things that I saw that that you wouldn't necessarily usually see at 12.
Tara, when do you know when it's time to see a psychologist?
Whenever I'm asked when should I see a psychologist, the first answer that I give is now, because you've asked the question, which suggests that there's something that's going on for you that you would either like support for, would benefit from support for, or are just curious to understand about yourself. And a lot of the time, the way that the mental health system works, or even the medical system really, is you don't go until everything's kind of turned to shit. And I am a big believer in a therapeutic style called positive psychology. And positive psychology is, the way it was described to me is you've got -5, 0, and +5. So -5 is basically rock bottom. Everything's falling apart. You're struggling to cope. You're struggling to function. It's all just too hard. +5 is living a full, rich, and meaningful life. You're feeling really connected and purpose driven and your values and your behaviors are aligned, all of these things are really great. In the middle at 0, that's where you're no longer unwell, but you're not necessarily well. You're just kind of there. And for clinicians and people who don't understand the concept of positive psychology, they usually won't seek support until they're -3, -4, because they've been trying, pushing, worry, and then they get to kind of that -3, -4, and they go, fuck, I can't do this anymore, I need help. And then the therapy or the work that they do will bring them up to 0. So they're no longer unwell and they think, wow, this is great. And that's where they stop. And that is such a shame from my perspective, because if we stop when we're at 0, only one thing needs to go wrong and you're already in minus numbers again. But also you haven't been taught how to go from just all right to thriving. And the easiest way to get back to a thing is through muscle memory. But if you haven't done it before, it's really hard. And that's why it's so valuable to have a professional who can actually guide you through to become fully well. And then off you go, and you can then start to see, oh, hang on, I've dropped down to +3. I know what I need to do to bring myself back up to +5 again. And that's really what my goal is with every one of my clients, is to basically work myself out of a job with them.
You know, with your dental health, they say you should see a dentist every 6 months. With your overall, getting a blood test, overall checkup, you should do it maybe once a year or every 6 months as well. With psychologists, how often should someone see a psychologist?
Well, if you're me, I see someone most months. And that's really because it's a space where I can fully be vulnerable. I can connect with someone and explore my own thoughts and my feelings. But not everybody needs to do that. And I think it's a different thing when it comes to dental health or physical health, because, well, I guess because there's a different focus on it. Though I think if it was possible for everyone to be able to access a psychologist, I would encourage that to be the norm. Though there's not enough psychologists out there to facilitate that right now, which means that there are waiting lists and things like that. So I guess if you are starting a therapy journey, the most helpful thing to do is to do more sessions in the beginning. So I encourage at least weekly in the beginning. Then over time you move to fortnightly, so that it gives you some space and time to be able to kind of fall down and skid your knees and give it a go and try again, and then come back and go, oh, okay, I tried this tool. It kind of didn't work, but it did work in this situation. So you getting that confidence. And then after a bit of time, fortnightly, then you move to monthly, because again, you're building up that confidence, that capacity to really regain control over your own mind, your own well-being. And yeah, that's called the step down approach. So I really value the step down approach. I think it's a really great way of seeking support.
And what is it like to see a psychologist? Say I want to book you for a session in person. After we've done all the paperwork, we're in the room, I'm sitting down. In the movies, I see someone lying down. Mm-hmm. When I see Louis Litt, getting his his psychology session, he's just lying down, eyes closed. Is that how it works in real life? How do you do it yourself?
Sure. So most of the time you're not lying down. That is totally the movies, which I find is hilarious, but cool. I guess it makes it more dramatic. But really what happens is it's going to probably be led by the psychologist in terms of the way in which they work. The way that I do things is I like to set expectations. I like to help the client understand what is about to happen, how it's going to happen and what it's likely going to feel like. So one of the first things that I say to a client is there's going to be a time in this process where you'll hate me and you'll think that I don't know anything and you won't want to come. All I ask is in those moments is that you come and tell me how shit I am, because then we can work out either A, is this part of the problem? So do we maybe run away from things when they're hard? Or do we think that we're okay, but maybe there's still some work to do? Or is there a relationship issue between you and I? And I believe in therapist shopping. It's important to find the right relationship. So if just because I might have all these skills and qualifications and all these certificates and all these years under my belt of working in addiction treatment, for instance, if you and I don't vibe, if we're not relationally connected, then it doesn't matter what I tell you or what I teach you. You're not going to do it because you don't like me, right? And that's not a problem in terms of you being bad or me being bad. It's just a relational thing. Not everybody gets along with everybody. So it's important to find the right relationship first. The second thing that's important to think about is this person going to call me on my bullshit when it's needed in a helpful and healthy way? And if they're not going to call you on your bullshit, then you will start leading the sessions, and that's where things can get problematic because your best thinking got you to where you are today. So sometimes we need someone else's best thinking to help guide you to where you want to go. So you need to have someone that's actually going to kind of go, oh, I don't know, hang on. Let's just put a mirror up and see what that actually is, right? That's a really valuable thing to look at when you're choosing. But in a first session with me, really I will start to help the client unpack what has been going on in the here and now that has prompted them to reach out for support. What's the problem? What's the issue? And I don't believe in delving into the past trauma or the past history in the beginning because, especially with people who come to me with addiction problems, the way that people who are living with addiction cope with distress is by acting out with their addictive behavior. So if we go into distressing topics straight away and you don't have skills and confidence to cope with that distress, then when you go home, you're just going to drink, use, or act out even more. And then you'll think, well, this isn't working. And the reason it's not working is because it's been done in the wrong order. So it's really helpful to start with tools. So what I like to do, I mean, at the Tara Clinic, it's different now. You can't just see me individually. It doesn't work like that. We have programs that we run. However, in the past, the way that it would work is the client would tell me, you know, I'm having this problem with porn, or I'm having this problem with alcohol, or I'm having this problem with whatever it is, my relationships. And I go, okay, give me a picture of what it looks like. What's your day-to-day problems? How is that impacting on your life? What do you want it to look like? And then once we can sort of see where we are and where we want to go, then together we create a plan on how to get there. And that process of how to get there is what the therapeutic process looks like. And so usually that's teaching distress tolerance tools, emotion regulation tools, assertive communication, boundary setting, all the things that help us as humans to make helpful decisions for ourselves moving forward.
What is mental health?
Mental health is really a spectrum of wellness and illness. And illness is not about a medical model. It's more about not feeling fulfilled, not feeling well, and really not feeling like you can function. So mental health is where on the spectrum you are sitting. There are things that you can do that help to improve your mental health. And there's also just as equally things that you can do that decrease your mental health. Sometimes people look at the concept of mental health as that being the problem, but it's actually a spectrum.
Is it more important to work on your mental health than your physical health?
Your mental health and physical health really go hand in hand because the brain is designed to deal with threats in our environment. And when our fight or flight response is switched on, we are primed to either run away from the tiger or kill the tiger. And that's where physical health comes in, exercise. If we are running away from a tiger or fighting a tiger, we're moving our body in an intense period in an intense way for a short period of time, and then we are safe. So by our body physically moving, it tells our brain that we're safe. The same can be said for the mental space. If we whatever we focus on, we create more of. So if we focus on our worry or we focus on our lack, then what that does is it tells our brain that there is a threat. So therefore, again, it thinks that there's a tiger trying to kill us. So you kind of need to attack this from both sides. It's important to focus on your mental health, to manage your brain from a mental space, and then it's important to focus on your physical health to manage your brain from a physical way.
Do you think there is a mental health pandemic crisis now compared to prior to COVID?
Since COVID, the focus on mental health has increased. So the awareness of it and the storytelling around it. So I think often it can be viewed as things have gotten worse. Yes, isolation negatively impacts on mental health, and financial insecurity impacts on mental health. Boredom impacts on mental health. Lack of physical exercise impacts on mental health. All of these things that were outcomes of the COVID-19 pandemic definitely increase the negative impact on your mental health. Though I think realistically, we had these problems to start with. What the pandemic did is it put a magnifying glass on it and made us all become really aware of it, so we can no longer sort of go, la, 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 la. It's not happening, everything's fine, I can just keep going the way I'm going. The pandemic really showed us that, well, we can't.
Tara, what is the definition of depression?
Depression is different to having a low mood or feeling sad. Depression is really an intense lack of motivation, of real low mood, and potentially even suicidal thoughts for an extended period of time. And that the things that you used to enjoy don't give you joy anymore. So if I really love going out on my bicycle, and then now I'm going out on my bicycle and it just doesn't feel like it brings me joy anymore, then that can be a symptom of depression. So it's an extended period of time of low mood, and the things that used to give you joy don't give you joy anymore.
Do you think the word depression is being used in a wrong way nowadays? Because I hear a lot of people saying, oh, I have depression. Like, how do you know you have depression? Or are you just feeling low or sad or lonely?
Yes, it's a big issue from my perspective. These anxiety and depression and those words are quite often put to normal everyday feelings, whereas they are actually diagnosable mental health illnesses. And the problem is that when you experience low mood or fatigue or loneliness, the best way to overcome that is by naming it. Because if I'm saying I'm depressed, but I'm actually lonely, then if I'm lonely, I'm going to do something about that. Whereas I'm depressed, what can I do about that? Take medication? That doesn't solve the loneliness issue. We need to actively identify what is the actual problem that we're experiencing.
Tara, what is the definition of addiction?
The Diagnostics and Statistical Manual talks about a whole heap of different criteria, but really what the definition is if you are actively using a substance or behavior to overcome your experience of stress or distress in a habitual way, even though the negative consequences are quite big, then that's really the definition of addiction.
How does someone know if they have an addiction?
If you've tried to cut down or stop whatever the problem behavior is in the past and you've been unsuccessful, then that can be a sign that there's a problem. You also maybe need more of it to get the same buzz. That is potentially a symptom. And also, if you feel like you need to do it just to feel normal, if you don't do it, you don't feel well, or you don't feel normal, that is another symptom.
What are the early signs that someone experienced addiction?
Is this people seeing this in other people, or is this you seeing it in yourself?
And say both.
Well, they're two different answers.
Okay. What if I am the parent and then maybe I think my son is addicted to video games?
Mm-hmm. Okay. What you'll probably see in that example is your son will probably be spending a lot of time either thinking about, playing, or talking about that game. Your son will probably be quite distressed if he doesn't have access to that game. He will probably be isolating from other friends and potentially even family as well, as a result of how much time and focus he's putting into the game. And addiction is really where it's coming at a negative consequence to other areas of your life. So, sometimes I've heard of kids not showering, not eating, not going to the toilet because they're so focused on the game. Those things are real signs that the game has become more important than their own needs. If you're thinking for yourself, do you have a specific example that you had in mind, or do you want me to just use
general?
Okay. So let's just say it's alcohol, right? If I am wondering whether I have a problem with alcohol, I might ask myself the question, how would I feel if I didn't drink tonight? And if there's a ping of worry, or I don't want to do that, or I can't do that, I have to have a drink, or I deserve a drink, or if there's any kind of emotional connection to that, then that can be an early sign that there's a problem there. And if we notice that we're doing it mindlessly as well, so we're drinking mindlessly, all of a sudden the bottle's empty and you think, how did that happen? And that's happening regularly. Or perhaps you're noticing that other people are telling you that there might be a problem, or that maybe it'd be helpful to cut down or stop. These can be some early warning signs that there's a problem.
There is this saying in the Philippines, once an addict, you're always an addict. Do you believe on this line?
No, definitely not. Sorry, Philippines. No, don't believe it at all. The truth is that when we think about addiction and we create it as our problem, this is who I am, this is my identity, I am an addict, then if you think that way, then it will be true. However, the way that I look at it is actually externalizing the problem. The person is not the problem is the problem. And the problem isn't even the addiction, it's actually whatever is driving the addiction. So you're actually 3 levels removed from the actual problem. So no, you're not an addict. You will not always be an addict, and recovery is real.
I love what you said. The person is not the problem. The problem is the problem, and the underlying motivation of that problem. It's a bit of a tongue twister there. Top 3 common myths about addiction.
Once an addict, you're always an addict. That's definitely not the case. The second myth about addiction is that there's only one road out. That's not true. The third myth about addiction is that the recovery process is hard and is an exhausting and awful experience.
What are the negative effects of alcohol addiction?
There are many negative effects of alcohol addiction, and sadly that seems to be the focus of the narrative, is focusing on all of the negative effects of alcohol addiction. I like to focus on the drivers behind it. However, the negative effects of alcohol addiction can be on your physical health and on your ability to sleep, on the safety of your sleep as well, which is a big one that not a lot of people think about. The impacts on your relationships, because when you are intoxicated, your unable to connect with others in the same way as if you're not intoxicated. And there's also a financial implication as well, depending on how much you're drinking and what your financial circumstances are. There's lots of negative impacts.
On the positive side, I'm not sure if this is positive. I know some people say that they think better when they have a bit of alcohol in their system. They're like, what, drunken master or something. I know this guy, he's a writer. He said he needs to have a bit of alcohol to be able to think more flowing, more clear. Is that true?
What alcohol does is it's a depressant, right? It's a relaxant. And that means that you are going to slow down. So it slows down your heart rate, it relaxes your muscles physically, and it also dampens your inhibitions. So what this is suggesting to me is actually that perhaps this friend of yours might have some performance anxiety issues, or just anxiety specifically, or perhaps some self-confidence issues around being able to say, you know what, I actually think this and I can think this, and without needing to reduce the inhibitions to be able to believe in themselves.
How can someone defeat the alcohol addiction?
Defeat is a really big word, and I think that's a lot of how addiction is looked at, is it's this big, deep, dark monster that's taking over your life, which means that the recovery process is often viewed as a really extensive, scary, intense thing that you have to go through. And most of the time, people who are living with addiction are already exhausted. That lifestyle is exhausting. It's really hard to do. And the idea of going into recovery from this big, deep, dark demon, it almost sounds too much to bear. So I think what I like to look at is, rather than going down the route of how do we defeat something, it's how do we start to separate ourselves from the problem. By doing that, you're already making it smaller than you, because anything that you can hold in your hand is smaller than you. We're not ants. We can't hold something that's bigger than us, right? So when you hold the problem in your hands and then you observe it from different angles through therapy or journaling, or, going to a 12-step meeting or a smart recovery meeting, by being able to really look at the problem, you then start to see how you are separate to the problem, that what's underlying the problem is actually the issue. And then you can look at practical ways of solving that driver. And then the alcohol just kind of goes away on its own. I work with clients for over 18 months, and we rarely talk about the substance itself. We mostly talk about stress management, relationships, boundary setting, all those things that help us to build a full, rich, and meaningful life that we now no longer need to escape from. And rather than focusing on stopping, I would encourage people to engage in change.
So if I have an alcohol addiction, what would be the top 3 or 5 simple, actionable steps I can do to overcome this problem?
First step I always say is track your behavior. So track the drink before you pour it or accept it from a friend or order it from a bar. Note it down, what time it is as well. You can get apps for that. It's really great. But when you note down the alcohol that you're using, over a week or over a month, you can then start to see patterns. When is there more alcohol happening? What time of the day? What day of the week? What week of the month? What's happening around me when this is more of a problem? And it also allows you to put on your reality pants, because you can see, oh, this is actually how much I'm drinking. Most people, when they're living with addiction, minimize the extent to which they're drinking or using or acting out. And so when you see it in front of you, you can go, oh, this is actually what's happening. Once you've got a really clear idea of what's happening, the next step with alcohol specifically is go and speak to a doctor, because it can be really dangerous to detox or change your alcohol use without medical supervision because you can have a seizure. So it's really important that with alcohol and with benzodiazepines in particular, that you are medically supported or medically supervised when you're making those changes. There's a really great phone line that you can talk to in Australia as well. It's a 24/7 phone line called the Alcohol and Drug Information Service. And they can also guide you on whether or not it's safe to start reducing the alcohol yourself, or if you do need to have a detox. So that's 3 things. So 1 is track, 2 is speak to your doctor, 3 is speak to the support line. 4, once you've managed to see that you're in a safe space to be able to change the alcohol consumption, you can look at, all right, what number of drinks is the number when I stop making helpful decisions. So for example, if I drink 4 drinks, I'm more likely to have a 5th one. But if I have 1, I'm less likely to have a 2nd. So at what point does my decision making change? So let's just say that if at 4, I'm more likely to have a 5th, then that would mean that at 3, I'm still able to make helpful decisions. Once you identify your number, then I recommend take 1 off. So then your self-imposed limit is 2 drinks in a sitting, and you'll know that you're going to be really comfortable in making the decisions that you want to make.
What drug stays in your system the longest?
Actually, that's weed. So marijuana stays in your system for up to 30 days, but it's actually held in your fat cells. So if you haven't had any cannabis for years and then you do a really intense exercise workout or you lose weight, you might have a THC reading in a urine test. So it's really important to be aware of that. The same can be said for the side of the road drug tests. Yeah, you just need to be careful. So cannabis is the one that lasts the longest. However, if you want to add to that, crystal methamphetamine, while it takes around sort of 3 to 5 days to come out of your system physically, the brain is actually detoxing from that substance for 9 to 12 months after your last use. So your brain hasn't come back down to homeostasis, so to that sort of normal range from, until at least 9 months after your last use. So it's very, very difficult to use ice in a social way because the brain is really impacted by that drug for, almost a year.
When I was in high school and college, I have some acquaintances, friends that use weed, marijuana. And when someone, like a principal or the teacher say, oh, there's going to be a drug test next week, the users, they said, oh, just drink milk every day, sweat it out, play basketball, go to the gym, and you'll be fine. So is that true?
Not in my experience. I've never heard the milk one before. Oh my goodness. So I used to work in a rehab for people just released from prison, which meant that 3 times a week, the clients that we had were providing drug tests through their urine. And we, as their clinicians, would receive those drug tests. And the way that it works on a drug test is the body metabolizes drugs and different substances out of your system in different ways, depending on what drug it is. So when you look at the results, based on what you see, you can kind of tell how long ago the last use was. When it comes to weed or cannabis, it's a number. So if you've just smoked, say, an hour before you've had to pee in a cup, then you're probably going to be in sort of the thousands. Over time, that number will reduce. And around a month or so after that, then it won't probably be detectable on the in the urine test. The way that we worked out that if you have exercise or you do this and it comes up in drug tests is we would have clients who would have what was considered a quote unquote dirty urine. So it would come back positive with like 20 of marijuana, but they hadn't had cannabis in years. But it was because they did a really big exercise workout right before they did the drug test. So yeah, I unless the drug testing that was done was a yes or a no rather than a number, I doubt that would work. I wouldn't bet my job on it.
Can someone be addicted to coffee?
Yes. You can be addicted to anything, really.
Anything.
Can
I be addicted to, I don't know, Nutella?
Absolutely.
Addicted to petting dogs?
Yeah, I guess so, yeah.
Addicted to, I don't know, watching Netflix?
Totally.
So anything can be an addiction.
Anything.
Can I be addicted to buying cameras?
Yes.
Can I be addicted to podcasting?
Yes. You can be addicted to anything.
I could be an addict myself.
Well, we don't call people addicts.
Yeah, we call them people who experience addiction. Yep, you taught me that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the reason that I say you can be addicted to anything is brief history. Back in the Ugg days when we had saber-toothed tigers trying to kill us in our cave, our brain thought that we were under threat, so it produced a whole heap of chemicals, which I call mush, that switch on our fight or flight response. Dopamine is the opposite of our fight or flight response. Dopamine is the brain's chemical that says we're safe. And so when we think about, addiction as a concept, it's linked to dopamine, because when we are in a stressed state and we do the behavior such as patting the dog, I mean, that's a helpful and healthy thing. But if it gets in the way of you, living your happy, healthy life, then yeah, it could be addiction. But let's just say if we believe that we need a coffee in order to relax, which is probably the opposite, but let's just use that as the example. If we believe that we need a coffee to relax because we're stressed, then our brain says that the coffee is what saved my life because the stress is perceived as a tiger. So anything that produces dopamine can technically become an addiction. And it's about how you interact with the thing that promotes dopamine that changes whether or not it is actually an addiction. Because dopamine isn't a bad thing. Dopamine is beautiful. Dopamine is why it feels so good to have a cold glass of water after you've finished at the gym. Because you are literally saving your life, right? That's what dopamine does. It's really helpful. It's just that when we are using the shortest way possible to solve our symptoms rather than the problem, that's when it can become an addiction.
How can someone recover from coffee addiction?
Start by tracking. How many are we drinking? How often are we drinking? What days are we drinking? Then we can start to look at what would you like it to look like? Do you want to stop altogether, or would you prefer to just be one a day? Or would you prefer to just be able to have it whenever you feel like it rather than feeling like you have to have it every day? So look at where are we at now by tracking? Where do we want to go by goal setting? And then plan a path to get there. So that might mean that we reduce how many cups we have each day. Then it might mean that we reduce how many days in the week we have coffee. Then it might mean we reduce the strength of the coffee. Then it might mean that we, that's sort of that stepped down approach, right? We want to look at, all right, where are we at? Where do we want to go? And how can we gently move ourselves there? Give yourself a time limit though. It's really important because otherwise your brain will just be like, oh, I'll start tomorrow. But if you want to give yourself a realistic time frame of going from 6 cups of coffee every day to 2 cups of coffee on a Saturday morning, then you could give yourself, say, 6 months and create a stepped approach to how you're going to get there. And then know that you will have intense detox symptoms. I had a friend. I had a friend in uni. We had to do an assignment for uni, which was a behavior change experiment on ourselves. And he chose to move away from Coca-Cola. And both the caffeine and the sugar that were in Coca-Cola, and he was drinking quite a number of cans of Coke most days. He was getting the sweats, irritability, fatigue, difficulty sleeping, and headaches as well. So all of these things are normal signs of the body and the brain detoxing out of caffeine and or sugar.
How does someone know if they have sex addiction?
Just the same as with most addictions, if you are spending a lot of time thinking about, seeking out, doing or regretting or coming down from the behavior, then that is a sign. Another sign is that you're engaging in risky behavior that is potentially putting your safety or your health at risk, or someone else's safety or health at risk. If you're having a lot of sex or risky sex that is also then impacting on your other relationships or your desire to build relationships, then that can also be a sign. But really what it is if you're noticing that the way in which you are connecting with sex is in a way that you're questioning whether or not that's helpful, then chances are there's probably a potential problem there.
How can someone recover from sex addiction then?
Well, first of all, I come back to tracking, right? The most helpful thing to do whenever you're wanting to overcome any form of addiction is knowing where you're at right now. Really taking off the rose-colored glasses and looking at the reality of the situation. Then you want to look at, all right, what does my outcome want to be? Do I want to be completely abstinent from sex? Some people might want to, others don't. So what do we do in terms of how do we get to what is our goal around sex? So is that perhaps we don't watch porn? Or if we do watch porn, we watch a certain style of porn. Or perhaps we engage in sex only within the relationship that we're in, if it's a healthy relationship. Or perhaps we only engage in sex in a safe way. So using protection, ensuring that there's consent. All of those things can be ways of looking at it. It really depends on the problematic aspect of the person. So what is the problem that you're seeing with your sexual behavior, and then where do you want to get to, and how do we work that way? So things that you can do to sort of slow yourself down. My favorite thing is exercise and mindfulness. Those two things are reset buttons for our brain. If you are exercising, you're using your body to cool down your mind. And when you practice mindfulness, you're using your mind to cool down your body. What that does is it opens up the logical part of your brain to help you make decisions that actually make sense to what you want to do, rather than being reactive and just kind of being a puppet on the string. So by practicing mindfulness and exercising regularly and being really clear on what behavior is okay and what behavior is not okay for you, then you can start to make changes.
Why do you think sex is very addictive?
Well, it is literally connected to survival. The way in which we as a species, or really most species, reproduce is through sex. So the brain links a hell of a lot of dopamine to sexual intimacy, because again, the brain says, yes, we're surviving, right? If we're also using it as stress management, or overcoming boredom, or managing loneliness, or a desire for connection, then all of those things also produce dopamine. So it's very pleasurable as well physically. So there's a lot of these positives that the brain says, yeah, we're alive, we're surviving, we're thriving, this is great. My my DNA is going to continue on down the line. So all of these things can be a big reason why sex can be quite an addictive thing.
Is there a harm in watching pornography?
I think fundamentally no. Though there is a lot of research that has shown that the way in which the brain changes and the views on sex and relationships can change as a result of the pornography that you do watch. So there is a lot of, there's something to be said for removing pornography from your life. Yes. However, at the same time, I don't like to tell people not to do something. I'd rather help you to make the decision about what's the driver behind the behavior. So, for example, if you're in an abusive relationship and you want to know what an intimate experience could look like in a healthy relationship, you could search for loving, compassionate pornography. And you can then see or witness what a loving embrace can look like, what connection. Sure, it's been created, but so are movies, right? So you can see what that can look like. And it can give you the opportunity to explore, what you want to do with that. If you want to raise that with your partner, if it's safe to, or if you want to move out of that relationship, again, with the supports around you to keep you safe. All of these things are an option. Another thing that's really valuable, I think, from pornography is it gives you the opportunity to kind of learn new stuff, right? You might not know that you're really into feet. And then you come across the kink of feet in a pornography film and you think, oh, actually, I'd really like to try that. And then you get really excited by that and you've found something that interests you, that you're excited by. I don't like to see things as either good or bad, right or wrong. I like to see them as helpful or unhelpful. And so if you can utilize pornography in a helpful way for a reason that is helpful, again, for you, then I say go for it. However, if you're noticing that the purpose of porn or the outcome of porn is unhelpful, then maybe have a look at it.
What could be the negative effects of pornography addiction?
For the most part, when I am working with people with addiction to pornography, they have started watching porn very, very early in their life. Maybe not even a teenager yet, 11, 12. And that's where they're learning how to engage in sexual acts, how to theoretically connect with another person, what sex is meant to look like, what bodies are meant to look like, and how long sex is meant to go for. All of these things are really unhelpful for a young brain to observe, because not all bodies look the same. Not all penises are as long as a forearm. Not all vaginas look the same, and not all adults don't have hair, right? However, in pornography, the expectation is quite often perceived as you come on a girl's face, you don't wear a condom, you're meant to be able to go for an hour and a half without stopping. Your body is meant to look a certain way and it's all meant to sound a certain way, and it's all meant to be fantastic from the moment that it starts. That foreplay isn't actually a thing, or connection isn't a thing, or consent isn't even discussed, right? So all of these things can be really quite problematic, again, for a young person to be learning the fundamentals of intimacy and sexual connection at a young age. The other thing that comes with that is because it's such a pleasurable experience to masturbate, to explore your body when you're younger and you're doing that on your own and you're using pornography to kind of connect to it, sometimes your brain can basically create a pathway between those two things. So I can only masturbate if I'm watching pornography, or I only enjoy sex if it's like this pornography. And, sometimes I have people who only feel that they can get an erection if they're using a certain substance. It's this sort of if this then that mentality. It can become really restricting. It means that you don't have the freedom to explore what actually is exciting to you, what actually is a way to connect with the person that you're with, rather than using their body to please you without their needs being sort of thought of.
And how can someone overcome pornography addiction?
With any addiction, the first thing you want to be doing is tracking how often we're watching, what kind of pornography are we watching, how long are we watching for, what days of the week, what times of the day, what weeks of the month, all of those things. Once we identify the pattern of behavior, we then want to look at, well, what is our end goal? What do we want to get to? Do we not want to have pornography in our life at all? Or do we want to actually understand what the driver behind this behavior is? And that can be a really helpful thing to go and talk to a therapist about, is what is the driver behind the pornography use? Is it because I actually want to escape the everyday life? Or is it actually because I want to have sex? Or is it actually because I feel like the relationship that I'm in doesn't align sexually? Or do I feel like I don't have the confidence to be able to speak up for what I would like to try out in the bedroom together? When you can identify where you are and where you want to go and what is driving the behavior, realistically, it's quite a simple process to overcome really any addiction.
So for someone with pornography addiction, actionable steps, should they just stop watching it, tomorrow? Is there a way to gradually, if they're watching, 3 hours of porn every day, should they reduce to 1 hour to 30 minutes? What's the best way to do it?
So telling someone to stop doing something is like me telling you not to think of a white bear. The moment I tell you not to think of a white bear appears in your mind's eye. So our brain doesn't hear the don't part. It just hears the subject. So if I say to myself, don't watch porn, don't watch porn, don't watch porn, I'm still focusing on porn, 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 porn. So instead of doing that, we want to be directing our focus in a direction that we want to go. So what would we like to be doing instead? If we were watching 3 hours of porn on a Thursday evening, what would we prefer to be doing? Would we like to go out and meet some new people? Would we like to go to the gym? Would we like to go for a run? Would we like to, learn guitar or do karate or whatever it is? Then rather than focusing on not watching porn, I start to schedule in the things that I do want to do so that it's easy for me to not watch porn because I'm doing something else that I enjoy. And again, by exercising and practicing mindfulness, we're able to cool ourselves down enough to be able to make helpful decisions. When we notice that there's either a craving or an urge, and those two things are different. We can go into that in a minute if you want to. But noticing if we have a craving or an urge to watch porn, we can stop and we can question it. It's not about, I'm shit, I need to stop thinking about this. No, it's actually, what is it that has prompted me to think of porn right now? Am I physically aroused because of something? Or am I lonely? Or am I bored? Or am I tired? Or am I hungry? Or am I thirsty? Or do I feel unwell? Usually it's one of those things. HALT is a great acronym to think about when it comes to identifying triggers and what the driver behind the behavior is. So H stands for hungry. So if you're hungry, but I add onto it, so hydrated and healthy. So if you're thirsty or if you're unwell, or you're hungry, you're more likely to make impulsive decisions. A stands for angry or big emotions. And that can also include excited and happy and joyful, because they're big emotions too. L is lonely or bored, and T is tired. If any of those things are present, then solve for that issue first before you choose porn. If you still want to watch porn after you've solved that problem, fine, that's all right, off you go, do the thing. You're an adult, and, as long as you're watching things that are legal and there is clear consent and that, you're in a safe environment, then if you still choose to do it, go for your life. Because the idea of pulling something away from you basically just turns your brain into a crying baby. And then it wants something to soothe it quickly. So that's when, if we stop watching porn, but we're not solving for the problem, we might turn to alcohol. Because that's, again, a quick thing that soothes the crying baby. Not literally, but you know what I mean.
That makes sense. Like, sure, I can't get porn. What's next thing to it that will give me the same satisfaction? Mm-hmm. Could be alcohol, could be drugs, could be video games, could be TikTok for 3 hours.
Yeah.
So I get a better understanding now about addiction. It's not really about that thing. It's about what's causing that thing. It's not about the alcohol, the drugs, the TikTok. It's what's causing that thing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. When I'm not being mindful, I end up staying up until midnight, 1 o'clock. Usually I would like to be in bed between sort of 9 and 10 p.m. And I usually sort of naturally wake up between sort of 6 and 7 a.m. If I'm not being mindful in my choices and how I'm feeling and really connecting to that, I will end up scrolling through TikTok for 3 or 4 hours until 2 o'clock in the morning because I was tired at 9 or 10 p.m., but I didn't pay attention to it and act on that. Instead, I started scrolling. So it's the same thing. If anyone can be overcome by HALT at any time, and whether or not the action that you take is, an addiction or not, is, I guess, how negatively is it impacting on your life, right? But yeah, when you can be really aware of HALT and understand that if you solve for HALT first, you're less likely to do the behavior you didn't want to do in the first place because you've solved the actual problem.
Why is social media so addictive?
Dopamine. There was research done years ago, specifically it was on heroin, but it's basically true for any addictive thing. They did testing on the amount of dopamine in the brain at different times along the process. So they tested when they had the craving, when they called the dealer, when they were waiting for the dealer to arrive, when they received the drugs, and when they used the drugs. Zach, when do you think out of those 5 points was the highest dopamine?
Is it in the moment you're using it?
That's the most common answer, and that's what I thought when I first heard about it, and it's wrong. The highest dopamine was when they were waiting for the drugs to arrive. Anticipation is actually where we get the highest dopamine when it comes to addictive behaviors. So if you think about my example, TikTok, right? When you scroll, you don't know what's going to happen next, so you scroll again. And then you think, oh, there could be something else. I'll scroll again. It's the anticipation. It's the same thing for gambling. That's why gambling can be really addictive, because we're anticipating the potential of a win. When we win, we don't actually feel that high. And it's the same for me if I'm having an unhelpful TikTok process. Like if I see something that's really exciting, it's like, yeah, okay, cool. What's next? Right? Same thing for, Tinder. You think, oh, who else?
Waiting for the perfect person.
Exactly.
I get it. When you order something online and it says that the package gonna be there in 10 minutes, that 10 minutes, you walk out the door waiting for that Australia Post, FedEx, whatever that is, to arrive. And that's when you're super excited. But I understand once you get the product, it's like boom, boom, boom. And then you receive the product and down. It's here.
Yes.
Time to open it.
Yes.
It's in that waiting, the anticipation. I get it now. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And I guess, when I was a kid, say we'll go to a field trip in school, place I really want to go to, you can't sleep the night before.
Exactly.
And in the bus with all the kids, you see them, they're all asleep.
Yes.
Like, what happened to you guys? Oh, I was so excited. I couldn't sleep last night.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Anticipation.
How can someone recover from social media addiction?
Pay attention to how often you're using it. If you notice that you're using it more than you want to be using it, the best thing to do is actively put barriers between you and that thing. So for example, you could remove the apps from your phone. So it means you have to log in on another computer to be able to look at it. Or if you want to go full throttle, then you could delete your accounts if you wanted to. Though the other thing that you can do, again, is look at what's the driver behind the behavior. Do I want actually to have some connection? Do I feel lonely? Well, maybe instead of scrolling through people's photo threads, maybe call them and say, hey, let's get together on Saturday and we'll go for a picnic. And I want to hear all about what happened last weekend. And then they can tell you the story rather than you flicking through the photos that they posted from their story. So those are some really helpful practical tips to do that. Is you want to know where you're at so that you're very clear on what the problem is. Put barriers in place between you and that thing, and then solve for the actual problem. It's really just 3 steps. Addiction recovery is 3 steps.
When I used to work in an office, I'm very observant, and I could tell among those guys who's got maybe a social media or technology addiction, because we all sit in a shared hot desk, and you see someone, their phone's just sitting there, but every 2 minutes they'll tap it just to see if there's new notification. When someone would go to the bathroom, they'll grab their phone and they quickly check it. When they get back, they're still on their phone. Lunchtime, everyone's eating together. You'll see people have their phone and they're tapping it. And now with the new phones, with the iPhone 14 or 15, I don't know what's the new phone now, the screen, they don't go off. It's just on in a dim mode.
Oh, really?
So you don't even have to tap on your phone to see if there's new notification.
Oh my goodness.
And it's crazy because I experience it. Even though when I say to myself, okay, I'm not touching my phone, face down, I'm just gonna focus on my work.
Yes.
But what do? Open it.
Yeah.
Like checking it every time. So no difference than tapping it.
Yeah.
Like maybe I should just throw this phone away into the ocean or just put it in a box, or because I don't think buying those apps to lock your phone will help a lot if you only need to type in 4 PIN code to access all the apps.
So 2 things. One, if you want to use the PIN code, you can give the PIN code to someone else.
It's like a nuclear bomb.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's this guy on Instagram who is in recovery from porn addiction, and he talks a lot. I can't think of his name right now. But he talks a lot about how he overcame his addiction, and what he did is he gave his best friend. So firstly, he told his best friend about the issue. He then set up a system where in order for him to get onto those sites, he had to have this PIN code, and he gave the PIN code to his best friend, which meant that if he wanted to ever look at those sites, he had to call his best friend and say, hey, I want to watch porn now. Can you give me the number? And that was a big barrier for him because he didn't want to have to call his friend to tell his friend that he wanted to watch porn, to then get the right. By that time, you've lost your urge. So it's about delaying, right? There's 3 Ds: delay, distract, decide. So if you can delay a decision and distract yourself with something that is fully all-encompassing, then it helps you to make a helpful decision, because usually you've kind of gotten over whatever it was that you were originally impulsively wanting to do. However, the other thing that I wanted to just point out is, did you hear your sentence that you said? You said, I'm not going to look at my phone. I'm not going to look at my phone. So based on what we spoke about before, what was your brain hearing?
Phone.
Yeah.
Phone.
Phone. Phone. Phone. Phone. Our brain focuses on the subject. So whatever subject we point it to, it'll be like, oh, cool, let's check that. Oh, we were talking about the phone. Yeah, let's look at the phone. Hey, the phone. Yeah, phone.
Can overthinking be an addiction?
Oh, I would link overthinking more to anxiety rather than addiction. Though, again, addiction isn't the problem. Whatever is underneath is the problem. So that could be anxiety with overthinking, resulting in some form of problem. Though overthinking is really, I would link it to worry. So years ago, I had a client who had a very beautiful way of describing this. And he drew it for me on a whiteboard. It was fantastic. He said, if you've got 1 foot in the past and 1 foot in the present, then you're shitting on the now. And that is absolutely true. So if we're dwelling on the past, or we're thinking about the past, or we're worried about the future, or we're trying to plan for the future, then you are literally pooping on your present, because you're not here. You're not experiencing it, because your head is either forwards or backwards. So anxiety is linked to future worry. Depression is linked to past, whatever that word is right now. But yeah, like dwelling on the past. And if you want to be well, if you want to focus on your wellness, the most valuable way of doing that is by being present, and mindfulness and meditation is really good for that.
I love that. You're shitting on the present. If your foot is on the past and the future, you get your spread, your leg spread.
Yeah.
All right. What advice can you give to someone to overcome overthinking?
Manage your mush first. So I spoke earlier about the idea that mush is all of the chemicals that your brain produces when you are in your fight or flight response, so your threat response. And just for everyone out there, it's actually 5. So fight, flight, freeze, faint, and fawn. And when you are feeling as though you're in a threatened state, you might not consciously know that. But if you're overthinking something, your brain believes that you're stressed. So by exercising, i.e. running away from the tiger or killing the tiger, you are now telling your brain that you're safe. So then that means that you're less likely to be overthinking, because you're more likely to be in the present moment, which means you can think logically. Because when you have mush in your brain, the front part of your brain switches off. And the front part of your brain is where all the logical thinking and problem solving happens. So if you want to have the ability to do problem solving or workshopping, the best thing to do is manage your mush. And the best way to do that is by exercising.
What's your advice to someone who wants to overcome gambling addiction?
Specifically with gambling, you can do a number of things to put barriers between you and the problem. So you can do self-exclusion rules at the casino or at the pubs. You can also do the same thing on the online apps and websites. And there's also a specific gambling hotline, gambling support hotline in Australia that you can call, where they can provide you with guidance around how to overcome the problem in the moment. Realistically, we need to look at the reality of the situation. The actual chances of you winning, they're really, really small, and the house always wins. So even when you have a big win, and you have big wins every so often, the reality is that over time, the house still wins. So part of that is putting on your reality pants and going, you know what? I am paying another organization a significant amount of my wage for all of this stress that's coming from the financial issues.
Let's talk about procrastination. How can someone overcome excessive procrastination?
There's a lot of talk at the moment around ADHD. And the interesting thing about ADHD, or just, other people whose brain is functioning without ADHD, but mostly in ADHD, you require a higher intensity of motivation before you actively take action. So if you were to have a normal bell curve, right, it's sort of like an umbrella, right? That umbrella, if an elephant sat on the side of it and sort of squished it to the right, then it would be flat, 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 peak, and then down, right? For the average brain, and for people who have, normal levels of motivation, they're very action-oriented people. They don't need a lot of intensity to get them into action. For people who do need more intensity, it takes a lot longer, and they need deadlines to be able to force the intensity of the motivation, because the time is coming up for that assignment to be due, or the deadline at work, or I don't know, whatever it is. When they're getting closer and closer, like me, for example, throughout almost my entire university degree, I was the night before assignment person. And I feel that is partly due to, this need for me to have a higher level of motivation before I started those tasks. So because those assignments were due on a certain day at a certain time, I had to get them done or else I would fail. And so that by becoming really aware of that over time, I was able to put strategies into place by starting things earlier, setting up systems that help me to step by step move towards the goal. Again, managing my mush, exercise, mindfulness, meditation. Those are things that will help you to, overcome procrastination.
Shopping addiction. How can someone overcome this? Online shopping, shopping in person, window shopping. How?
Well, window shopping, unless you're spending so much time there that it's getting in the way of you living a full, rich and meaningful life, I'm unsure how to sort of suggest that would be a problem. However, set yourself a budget. Again, track it. Know what you're spending. Know what you're doing. What's the driver behind the behavior is the second step. Understanding that, and then solving for that problem rather than the symptom. And then looking at, what are you okay with? Do you want to have a certain amount of money that you allocate to shopping? And once you go over that, that's done. The Barefoot Investor is a really great money management system that I love. I freaking love Barefoot. Scott Pape, he's the bomb. And really what he talks about is you have 60% of your take-home pay is the maximum amount that is on your daily expenses, so your living expenses. Then you put 10% in blow money, which is spend it on whatever you want. 10% in savings for something that you're really excited about, and then 20% in other forms of savings for, fire extinguisher and, just security money. And so then if you go, all right, well, I want to follow that as an example, then 10% of my take-home pay is what I get to spend if I want to. But if I'm going over that all the time, then again, talk to someone. Talk to a therapist.
From what I'm hearing, most of this addiction, they're just the cravings for dopamine.
Mm-hmm. Completely. Yep. You are experiencing distress or big feelings. Your brain perceives that as life-threatening. It knows that in the past when I've done this behavior, I have lived. So I'm going to do that again so that I live today. That's literally, it's as simple as that. And when you can understand that addiction as a process is quite simplistic in its function, then you can start to remove the shame and the guilt that's associated with it, because you're not stupid, weak, or somehow defective. This is your brain trying to keep you safe. And we can just thank our brains, thanks so much. But actually, I don't need to buy this. I can check my halt. Am I hungry? When did I last have some water? Right? Am I tired? Am I bored? What can I do differently?
How do you know if someone is a narcissist, and how do you handle conversations with them?
I would really recommend that you speak to a professional about this issue, because sometimes what can happen in relationships where someone has narcissistic personality disorder is that it can actually be quite a dangerous or risky relationship. So I would definitely recommend, first off, to go and speak to someone. The way that people often talk about how they feel around someone who might have narcissistic traits is that they feel like they've been put on a pedestal, they've been flooded with love and affection, and been made to feel like they are really, really important to this person. And then all of a sudden, in a seemingly systematic way that you don't really sort of notice the clear process of what's happening, but you start to second guess yourself. You start to feel like you don't have as much self-esteem. You start to question your own views on things and start to feel like the only way that you can make decisions is if that person says it's okay or tells you what to do. And part of what happens is there's this sense of a codependent relationship. And so when I talk about a codependent relationship, I mean that the person with narcissistic traits often needs to feel needed or needs to feel important. And the person who is with them needs that person. So you both need each other in an unhealthy way. And so it's kind of like putting two hooks in together. And the more one of you or the other one pulls away, the more the other tries to run towards the other one. So for example, if you and I are in a relationship, and let's just say that I have narcissistic traits, if I start saying that I want to end this relationship, you will do everything in your power to try and come closer to me. And if you choose that you want to end the relationship, I will start to say things like, I'm sorry, I'll change, I love you, I didn't mean it. Because that's me leaning into the relationship. And when you look at codependency, there can be power and control issues, there can be coercive issues, there can be physical abuse, mental abuse, financial abuse as well. So that's why when we're talking about narcissism, I think it's very important to know that you're speaking with a professional, because what you may think narcissism is, it might not be. And if you're not sure, then it's helpful to have someone who can connect with you.
I'm not used to asking for help, but I am quite struggling. How do I handle it?
That's hard for me to answer without having the context. And I'm going to answer it in terms of how can you ask for help. First of all, the most important thing to think about is you're not alone. Put it this way. We've got the Paris Olympics happening this year. I can guarantee, and I don't guarantee anything, but I can guarantee that every single one of those athletes that are at the Olympics has a coach, right? They are theoretically at the top of their game. They are the elite athlete in their field, in their country, because they've been chosen to go to the Olympics, and they have a coach. So everyone deserves to have support from someone who either has gone that road before or can sort of look from the outside in and not be taken away by the emotions of the situation. They can just look at things logically with you. So you're not alone, and it is not a weakness to ask for help. And anytime that you think that way, I'd encourage you to think about the Olympics.
I occasionally take illicit substances, but I don't think I'm addicted. I am ashamed of it though, so I don't tell my wholesome friends about it. Is it something that I need to address with a professional?
I'm really sorry that you feel that way to this person. I'm sorry that that's your experience. The shame and guilt that is often associated with drug use is one of the hardest things to overcome, and it's also the main thing that maintains the problem. There's 6 stages of change. The first stage is pre-contemplation, which is where no change happens. Shame and guilt, the research has shown, takes you back to the pre-contemplation stage of change. So anytime you feel shameful about this, instead of it helping you, it's actually hindering you. It's stopping you from being able to make change if you want to. I also think it's important to look at the language that you chose. You said your wholesome friends, which to me suggests that you don't see yourself as wholesome, as whole, because you're doing this. And I'd encourage you to challenge that. If it's something that you want to make changes for, cool. Do that. If you feel that you are enjoying this and that's what you would like to do for your life, and it's not getting in the way of your health, your safety, your work, your relationships, or, just taking up so much of your time, then it's okay, and you're not broken, you're not bad because you're choosing this for yourself. So yeah, I hope that helps.
Last one. I find it hard to make sound decisions when I'm emotional, especially when I'm hungry. What can I do to improve myself? Before you answer this, it reminded me of a quote. You're not you when you're hungry.
Ah!
Was that Snickers?
Yes, it was Snickers.
And I'm like, if I would give a suggestion to this guy, I'm like, just eat.
Yeah.
Pick up a burger before you make a decision. But you, as a professional, how would you respond to this?
Well, I spoke about an acronym before. Do you remember the acronym?
Which one? HALT?
Yeah, HALT. Yeah. Exactly. This person has described 2 parts of HALT, which is they're hungry or they're experiencing big emotions. So they're angry or have got big emotions. And so when you have these things, it's important to solve for the thing first. So if you're hungry, absolutely eat something. My advice, if I can give advice, I don't usually give advice though. My advice would be carefully choose what you choose to eat. So I'm mindful that you suggested a burger or we were talking about Snickers. Now, what happens with Snickers as an example is it's chocolate, there's a lot of fat, there's a lot of sugar, there's a lot of all of those things, right? What happens is the blood blood, my brain keeps wanting to say blood alcohol limit. The blood sugar level peaks, right? And what happens is when it peaks, it also plummets just as fast. And so what happens when our blood sugar plummets is we tend to get irritable, we tend to have headaches, we tend to crave more. So if you think about like low GI, so things that keep you fuller for longer. So, nutritious food that if you look at it, you know what's in it, right? So veggies, fruit, meat, grains, those sorts of things. They're the things that I would be encouraging. When you're looking at HALT and you're noticing you're hungry, I would encourage you to have something nutritious, because that will also solve for the spike and plummet of your blood sugar.
There are other hundreds of questions that we can talk about. I think if we're going to answer everything, this is going to be like a 10-hour long podcast, and we don't have the time. Tara, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you to everyone for your questions. It was really great fun.